everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I hope you're doing really well, wherever or whenever in the world that you are. I can't believe I'm saying this, but happy March. I don't even know where the first 2 months of the year have gone, but here we are. And today we're gonna be doing a February wrap up. We're gonna chat about all of the books that I read in February. I had a pretty amazing February reading month. I read 17 books, and generally speaking, I really enjoyed myself. I didn't have any huge flops, no DNFs. As always, if you've read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I love to hear how our opinions are similar or different. And yeah, let's get started. So this year I'm trying out a new thing where instead of just kind of doing a chatty style video where we're going one by one and I give you a synopsis and tell you my thoughts. I love watching those, but I'm just not the best at describing the premise of a book. And so I feel like that's setting me up for failure. So instead, we're gonna sort of gamify the wrap up and use a tier ranking style structure. All right, so for this tier ranking video, we're gonna have 5 tiers. And for February, they're gonna be aligned with flowers because flowers are pretty and romantic, and I like them. So my top tier are dahlias. And to me, these are just the most exquisite pieces of art. They are stunning, they're perfect. And so these to me were my favorites of the month, the best things that I read, books or short stories or whatever that I highly recommend. So that's my top tier. Right below it is the sunflower tier. And these are wonderful. Sunflowers are so versatile. They go with so many different bouquet arrangements. They're just really iconic and they're beloved. They're so gorgeous. And these are books that I think a lot of people are really gonna love. I myself really enjoyed it. And so these are our sunflower books. Below that is our rose tier. These were fine. Maybe a little overrated or a little overhyped, and like they're fine. They're nothing extraordinary. They just are middle of the pack, I guess. The forget-me-nots are kind of exactly what they sound. I didn't even know what a picture of these flowers were, which is very fitting. And these books are similar in the sense that I don't remember much about them, nothing about the themes, characters, world building, story arc, like nothing is standing out in my mind. It's not necessarily that I didn't like it, it's just not sticking with me as the month has gone on. And then finally, dandelions. These are my least favorite reads. And these, dandelions look nice. And maybe I was excited to read them, but at the end of the day, they're a weed and you don't want them. You don't want them. Take them out of your garden, take them out of your yard. Would not recommend, try to avoid, ick. So those are the tiers. So now let's get into the books. I started the month, if you haven't watched my Reading Roulette TBR from like January for February, go watch it. It's really fun. Essentially, I have 2 wheels and I spin them each to create kind of a mad-libbed reading prompt for me. And I had 3 prompts from February. The first one was a horror book from one of my favorite authors. And so for this, I picked Mama Tulu by Jessica Guess. The second prompt was a literary fiction novel that has magic in some way, shape, or form. And for that, I chose Exit West. And then the third pick was a fantasy romance or romantasy from my Kindle. For that, I dove into the Rain and Ruin book and the Mages of the Wheel series. So anyways, this first book, well, it's not really a book. This is a short story. It's from a audio only horror anthology. I'll put on the screen what the name of this series or anthology is called. There's 2 seasons of it. And so Jessica Guess, I discovered a couple of years ago, and I was obsessed with the horror short story of hers that I read. She quickly became one of my favorite authors. I just wish there was more of her work out there. And so this is a horror short story, and It's following this girl as she's trying to deal with some hardship in her life, and she seeks out the help from this woman in their town. And yeah, it's spooky. It ends on quite a bit of a cliffhanger. It's so short. I wish it was either a real novella or like a full-length novel in and of itself. I think it's based on folklore from the Caribbean or from Jamaica. I'm not 100% sure, but it was great. The end literally gave me goosebumps. All right, so where to put Mama Tulu? I loved this little short story. It was interesting. I was nervous the whole time. It is really, really short though. So I feel like I'm gonna put it in Sunflower because I think if you've not read anything from Jessica Guest, you should give her horror work a go. She's a really charismatic writer. Like, I feel really connected and excited by the worlds that she creates. I loved it. I had a great time. I don't know if it's gonna be for everybody, but I think this is worth a listen. It's audio only, and the anthology has a lot of really, really big time authors. Even if you don't read this one, maybe pick up the anthology. Again, I'll have the text of it, the name of it somewhere on the video. So yeah, I think it's gonna go in the Sunflower tier, even if it's towards the bottom. Next, is anyone surprised that I've reread yet again Manacled? I don't need to say much more. I love this fan fiction. I'm weirdly addicted to it. I find myself craving it. I don't know what there is to say. I really enjoy it. It's starting to feel like a comfort read, kind of despite some of the dark themes that are in it, because now that I've read it 5 times, I know where it's going and I sort of know which scenes I can kind of half listen to. But I do find that every time I listen to it, I pick up on different elements of foreshadowing, and like different passages and chapters and sections stand out to me. So I loved it. Top tier it is. All right, next. So Danielle L. Jensen is not one of my favorite fantasy romance authors by any means, but this series, the Bridge Kingdom series, is one of my favorites, like of all time. It's an enemies to lovers, an arranged marriage situation, and I knew that she had a new release coming out at the very end of February. So I just wanted to kind of get back into the writing style that she has and kind of the world building, even though I know this new book is the first in a totally different world. It's a totally different series, but still, I just like had an itch, and so I said, why not? It was my bedtime read. So I reread The Bridge Kingdom. I love it. I'm gonna put it in Sunflower. It is such a great like introduction into fantasy romance, where there's a little bit of romance, there's a little bit of world building, there's a little bit of betrayal and scheming. It's got a lot of things that I think people would like, and it's kind of an OG. I really love it. So I reread that, loved it. Then I read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This is the first Ann Patchett book that I've ever read. And so this book, you're following this mom and this family as she's recounting a previous love of hers as she was growing up. She was dating this now very, very famous actor, but she knew him before he kind of hit it big. And so she's telling this story to her daughters, and kind of through this storytelling, you get to know the family a little bit more, their dynamics. And it's really sweet. It's really heartwarming. It has some sort of unexpected references to the pandemic that I was worried were going to take me out of the story, but I actually felt it really relatable. And so I really enjoyed this. I think if you're in the mood for sort of a sweet, emotional, kind of heartwarming family story, this might be a great one to pick up. I think I'm going to also put it in the Sunflower. I was really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. I was weirdly skeptical going into it because I've just heard that Ann Patchett is a really, really popular author, and I always get a bit nervous reading these like super, super popular authors. And I know that it was a Reese Book Club pick, and so those have been really hit or miss for me. And so I was a little like, I don't know, but I really enjoyed it in the end. Next up, I read The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. I hadn't really realized this when I first started it, but this is the sequel to whatever her, what is this, like the DNA duology or something, the DNA duet. And so you're following one of the friends that you meet in the first book. And I really liked this. You've got a romance author, and for reasons, she's sort of convinced to be the main contestant, the main love interest in a dating show. And her and the producer kind of strike up a friendship, and it's very angsty. There's a lot of mutual pining. I loved the main female lead in this, Fizzy? Is that her name? Oh gosh, I'm kind of forgetting. She is like so funny. I laughed out loud at some of her comments and some of her kind of back and forth with other characters. She's really, really likable, and I really had a good time with this. I also think I'm gonna put this in the Sunflower. Wow, I had a great reading month already. Look at this. I'm gonna put this in Sunflower because, again, I think if you like the first book in this little duet, I think you'll love this one. I think I like the second one even more than I like the first one. So I'm gonna put it just below Tom Lake, but above The Bridge Kingdom. Next, I read A Not So Meet Cute. This is a recommendation from one of my friends at work, Amber. She had read this by Megan Quinn and was just like giddy about how fun it was. So I picked it up and I had a good time. The premise is a little bit ridiculous. I can't remember the characters' names, but the girl, she is in a real financial pinch. And so she's kind of set on this impulsive quest to find a rich husband to solve all of her problems. And he is this big gazillionaire real estate guy. And he sort of finds himself in a bit of a pickle where he also needs to find a fake fiance kind of situation. So of course their paths cross and their relationship and story pick up from there. It's a little ridiculous. I felt so about their relationship and about their chemistry. There were quite a few steamy scenes, but because I wasn't super invested in them as a couple, I felt kind of lukewarm about their spicy scenes. Do I want to put it in a rose? Because it was fine. I enjoyed my reading experience, generally speaking. Yeah, that feels right. It was fine. I think if you really like Megan Quinn, I think you'll probably really like this. If you like fake dating, you might like this. Yeah, it was an interesting book. All right, then I read The Build-Up by Tati Richardson. And this was a story that follows these two architects as they work at the same firm and end up working on the same project together, and kind of as they're creatively collaborating, you know, sparks fly. There's a lot of office drama. And yeah, I think this was also okay. I'm already kind of forgetting a lot of like their relationship. Like I don't even remember. I don't remember their names. I feel like I really liked her, but he was kind of bland. I think this might be a forget-me-not. I think because this is her debut novel, and I enjoyed myself, and I think I'll certainly pick up more from this author. It just wasn't my favorite. It was, as the month has gone on, it's a little bit forgettable. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else revolutionary to say about this. It was fine, but it's just not really sticking with me as a book that I think I'll reread or I'll come back to, or even like come August. I'm not even sure if I'll remember it. So yeah, that's The Build-Up. Then I read on my Kindle the Rain and Ruin book by J.D. Evans, and I freaking loved this. I was so pleasantly surprised by how good this book, but also the series is. I don't know why I was weirdly dragging my feet. I had started it on my Kindle maybe a year ago, and I wasn't really feeling it. And it does have sort of a slower start. There's a bit of world building and exposition that happens at the beginning to kind of set the scene. But after maybe the first 50, 60 pages, it really picks up. And the political scheming in this series and in this book stressed me out. I loved how complex everything felt, the world building, the political machinations, the magic. I found everything so unique and so interesting. And on top of that, In this book, you're following one couple, Naime and Makram. Naime is like a very thoughtful, she considers all of the things before she makes a decision. She's poised. She just has such a quiet strength about her that I really admire. And then Makram is just this like sexy, charismatic, impulsive fighter guy. And they are so drawn towards each other, and they end up in this arranged marriage political alliance situation. Their chemistry is off the walls. Like, it is so good. You don't get a lot of spicy scenes. I think maybe only one or two, but the ones you get feel really, really worth it. It is kind of like a slow burn. It's so fun. There's so much tension, both like in the plot and within their relationship. It's great. I loved it. I'm already like wanting to reread it, even though the next book, I think the author's still writing it. And so I don't know when it's gonna be out, but I loved it. I loved it so much. And so it's great. You should read it. And I feel like it's really underrated. I don't feel like I've heard many people talk about it. So that's book one. Then I binged this series. So then I jumped into Storm and Shield, which is book two. Again, you're following a separate couple within the same world, within the same plot. And it's fascinating. I liked this one a little bit less, but I will say the characters in this one really grow on you. And by the end, I like adored them so much. I think I'm gonna put this one in Sunflower, maybe just below the Ann Patchett book. I'm also gonna put Siren and Scion kind of right there. Similarly, at the beginning, I wasn't sure how I was feeling about the couple, but then by the end, I loved them and I loved their dynamic. And again, each book, the plot thickens, the world expands a bit. There's so many stressful things going on, and it's a really, really fast-paced series. And then Ice and Ivy, I liked almost as much as I liked the first one. The main girl in this one, oh no, I'm forgetting her name. Oh my gosh. Yeah, whatever. I'm forgetting her names, but she was so nurturing and warm, and she was like the perfect counterpart to the male lead in this book, who you've met kind of throughout the first three books. And it was great. I loved it. I loved the plot. Again, I loved how the world is expanding. It's just such a good series. I'm obsessed, if you can't tell. Okay, so that's that little series. Then I slogged my way through A Quiet Life in the Country. I started reading this book on my Kindle, and I was not obsessed with this at all. Like, the whole first half I considered DNFing. Essentially, you're following Lady Hardcastle and her maid, Flo. They've moved to the country to seek out a quiet life. And of course, they're strolling on the beach and they come across a dead body. And so begins their adventure to help the police solve the mystery. It's a cozy mystery series. There's I think like 12 installments. It's pretty short. I don't think this is gonna be for everybody. I'm gonna put this in Rose, but the top part of that. This was good. I enjoyed myself, especially once halfway through I switched to the audio version. The narrator brought so much more life to these characters and so much charisma and chemistry. It really shifted my engagement in the story. And so I would recommend, if you're gonna read this, I would always recommend listening to the audiobook, almost always, but this one especially. I was gonna DNF it reading it on my ebook, on my Kindle, and then I ended up really enjoying it by the end. But kind of considering my whole reading experience, it's not my favorite cozy mystery I've ever come across. I may or may not continue in this series, and I think it was fine. There is some funny banter, and they're pretty witty characters in it, and it's a quaint little small town. So if those things appeal to you, I think it's worth giving it a try, but it's just not my favorite thing. Next, I read Salt Houses, and this story follows a family kind of across generations. You follow 3 generations of people within the same family, and it spans decades, and you watch as war really shapes where this family goes. The family originates from Palestine, and then after the war of 1967, they end up moving to Kuwait. And then after a war situation that went on in Kuwait, they moved somewhere else, and you kind of follow different people from the family. And I thought it was a really interesting novel. I think the writing is beautiful, and you kind of get like 1 or 2 chapters from each family member. Although it is told in a linear way, it does jump around. Like there's some big time gaps that sometimes left me feeling a little bit confused. And I wasn't quite as like emotionally connected to the family as I was hoping. I think some of that is because we jump around quite a bit. The dad is probably my favorite character. He's just so sweet. And yeah, there's some flawed, interesting characters. The family, you know, has some really beautiful moments. They have some really tense moments. It does feel like a really authentic, well-rounded family. They feel really real. So I think I'm gonna put this, maybe at the bottom of Sunflower. If you were looking for more Palestinian media or content, the author herself is Palestinian, and so I would recommend giving this a go. I don't know if everybody's gonna like it. I saw kind of mixed reviews. Some people felt like it was incredibly moving and heartwarming, and then other people felt a bit underwhelmed. And I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I think I ended up giving it like a 4 stars, but maybe like a 3.5 rounded up. By the end, I was pretty emotionally connected to the characters. And again, I think the writing is beautiful. So yeah, that was Salt Houses. It was a really interesting read, and I think I definitely may pick up more from this author. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. Next, I picked up Exit West, and this was a really interesting story. It's not very long, and you're following kind of this duo as they meet, feel instantly connected to each other, but the country that they're from is experiencing a pretty intense, unsafe war situation. And so you're kind of following them as they're trying to maintain their connection with one another, and their relationship as they're kind of in a really dangerous place. And they discover that there are these magical doors that transport you to different parts of the world. And so they work together to find one of these doors and go to a new place, only to kind of realize, you know, the grass isn't necessarily greener, and you're with them as they are struggling to figure out what they mean to each other and navigating just the environment that they find themselves in as they go through these different portals. It was really interesting. The author himself is the narrator, and I actually thought he did a really nice job. This is a book that I could see really sticking with me because I've not really read much like this. I don't read a ton of portal anything, and that magical element, that magical realism element was really well done. I think I'm gonna also put this in Sunflower and maybe above the True Love Experiment. Like, it didn't captivate me quite as much as the Mages of the Wheel series by J.D. Evans, these kind of 4 books, but it was really good. It was really good. Yeah, I highly recommend. If you haven't picked it up, I definitely would. This was actually a recommendation from one of my work friends as well, and it was a great recommendation. So thanks, Dania. Then I finished kind of my reread of the Bridge Kingdom, and I'll just put it right next to the other Bridge Kingdom. I really love this series. I even think the second book is better than the first. Again, as you kind of watch Laura try to make amends with some things that went on in the first book. Yeah, it's great. It's really, really good. Then I read a Fate Inked in Blood. This is Danielle L. Jensen's new release, and it's a Viking-inspired story. I'm not gonna pretend that I know how to pronounce any of the characters' names. The audiobook was great. I highly recommend. The narrator is Norwegian, is a Norwegian speaker. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase. So I think it really helped immerse me in the world. And you're following this young woman as she reveals a very unique power of hers as she's connected to the shield maiden god Lean. and ends up stuck with this Earl, and you're watching her as she's kind of trying to figure out who she is, what does this magic mean to her, all while she's got this incredibly angsty relationship with the Earl's son, and it's kind of forbidden because she's been married off to the Earl, and it was a fun time. I think the main character, who of course I'm forgetting her name, okay, so in Reign and Ruin, I thought Naime was one of the most interesting, well-rounded, clever female main leads I've ever read. And what's her face in A Fate Inked in Blood is not that way. She's a bit impulsive and a bit impetuous, and she's kind of immature, and she does and says things without thinking, and that drives me a little bit nuts. I find impulsive heroes and heroines really frustrating, and so you do get to kind of watch her grow throughout this first book, and I'm curious to see what comes next. The book leaves off on not like a cliffhanger, but definitely leaves you with lots of questions, and I'm eager to see where the story continues. So I'll definitely read the next book whenever it comes out. I just didn't love her, but I found that their kind of longing for one another felt really real, and so I liked their chemistry. I think I'm gonna put this in Rose, but at the top. It was good. I just don't think it's the best Danielle L. Jensen work I've read. It has made me kind of crave more Viking-inspired stories, and so I think I might do a little Googling to try and figure out other books that might scratch this itch. In that sense, I felt very immersed in this world, and again, I'm very curious to see what's gonna come. So I think it's fine just in the Rose tier. And then my final read from February is Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. And this I buddy read with Becca from Becca Books in Bujo. Of course, I'll leave her channel information down below. If you haven't already watched her videos, and if you're not already following her, you absolutely should. She's such a delight. She's so warm and kind. And we buddy read this, and it was really fun to kind of chat as we were reading. And we had similar thoughts. Both of us felt the beginning was pretty slow, and by the end, we both felt that the story picks up about 3/4 of the way. You kind of come full circle from a pretty intense prologue. You know, the romance in here is okay. Both of us didn't care for the audiobook narrators. Their voices for each other were so different. It was a bit distracting. Like the male narrator, his voice for the female character was so different than the female narrator's voice. It was just, yeah, it was a little off-putting and took me out of the story a little bit. And I think as a romance reader, the insta-lovey vibe was underwhelming. But, you know, as you spend time with this family, as they're traversing the Oregon Trail and experiencing some pretty scary and troubling times, I did start to feel more connected to them, and you know, I felt teary at some points. And so I think what I'm gonna do, where it's gonna land, I think I'm gonna put it in this Rose tier as well, and honestly kind of towards the bottom of that. It was an okay read. I think both of us were a little bit disappointed by the end. I do think us buddy reading it made the overall experience more enjoyable. At least that's the case for me. If we hadn't been buddy reading, I would have DNF'd this book for sure after like the 5th chapter. I was like, I think I even sent her a message at one point saying like, I'm thinking about maybe soft DNFing. And because she was starting to feel more invested, the FOMO part of my brain was like, okay, I'll keep going. And I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I read it. I think I definitely consider reading more by Amy Harmon. I think I just might be a little more selective on which premises sound interesting to me. This was a book I wanted to read from last year. It was on my 23 books I wanted to read in 2023. And I selected this because it was like her top rated book, not necessarily because it was the Amy Harbin book that I wanted to read the most. And so I think I'll just keep that in mind kind of moving forward. So there we are. There's our tier ranking. Generally speaking, I really liked a lot of the things that I read. I had some new favorites, especially with the Mages of the Wheel series by J.D. Evans. Like, that is absolutely a new favorite right now, and I'm already daydreaming about rereading it. As always, I love my Manacle reread, but like, that's so predictable. And I read some really different books for me, things that are outside of my comfort zone, and I'm delighted that I really enjoyed them. Like Exit West was fascinating. I really enjoyed Mama Tulu by Jessica Guest, and I really liked Salt Houses. There were no huge flops, like even The Build Up and A Not So Meet Cute. I enjoyed those books. I think I gave both maybe 3 stars still, so they were fine. I just don't think either one's gonna really stick with me as we move forward. So there it is, all the books that I read in February, a really strong reading month. And I cannot wait to keep reading, keep this momentum going into March. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. It really helps. Or feel free to leave a heart emoji, because I definitely read some really wonderful, lovely books. Yeah, I think that's all I got for you guys today. Happy reading moving forward, and I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye.